live.
Live is overrated.
And let me pop out the chat.
So let's slow things down. That can go away. That can go away.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us again for another episode of SEO Fight Club. Let me go ahead and share my slides. That would be helpful. All right, and present that from the beginning. Okay, so we have a cool topic today. We're going to talk about title variance. And I know when I say that, people think of recent news and all the H1 title swapping that's happening. But what we're talking about today is a little bit different, but I'll get into that in just a moment. So first, Clint, what's going on?
Hey, Ted, how you doing today?
Pretty good.
This week we talked about writing web page schema and using rank gear to do that. But instead of writing, just basic web page schema, I actually went into how to build the hierarchies, organization, article, has parts and all that stuff. So it was a good show. I enjoyed it.
Awesome. So if people want to find your show, they should go to YouTube. They should search for it by name, SEO This Week. It'll show up as the #1 show. I know that a while back you were entertaining the idea of having callers. Did that ever come to fruition?
I have the system. It's there. We have the number. I've had one person call though. Everyone's scared. SEOs are introverts, I guess.
You need some sort of a prize system for callers.
Yeah, maybe. But isn't my presence there prize enough? No.
It should be, but maybe if there's an honorific, calling out the people who participate in the following episode, people will do it for the glory.
True.
Yeah, I don't know. I want that to work. I'm not sure how to get that to work. I mean, people have call-in shows all the time. Got to figure out their tactics. So if you follow his show and you call in and Clint feels up to it, he'll give me a list of shout outs and I'll shout out on this show. Let's see if that works. Experiment time.
Oh.
Another cool show is the SEO video show. Have you checked out this show at all, Clint?
Oh yeah, I watch him every once in a while. I get envious watching his production stuff, and I get away and I beat him up with 100 questions on what he's doing for his production stuff, and then I come back later and watch it again, and then ask him all the same questions over again.
Yeah, those youngsters, they always have the best production quality. What's going on there?
Yeah, he's got to be putting at least 3 or 4 hours into every one of those shows before the show,
Yeah, and YouTube shows, they generally, for SEO YouTube shows, they generally don't pay any bills. If you're lucky, you get like coffee or beer money.
Yeah, if you're really lucky.
So we count on you to like and subscribe. So please consider doing that. I like Dre's show. It's an interview show. So he gets all the biggest personalities in SEO and finds out what makes them tick. So again, just go to YouTube, search it by name. And then Carolyn, what's going on with your podcast?
It's happening Friday.
Well, what happened this week?
Well, this week is actually going to be more of, there was an article that was published saying like how to pick an SEO company. And it listed all the things that a business owner should know before. And so I'm just going to go through some of that.
Nice. And your podcast is on every platform. So if you have a favorite platform, you can search for Confessions of an SEO and you will find it there. You can also search for it in Google. It'll be number one in Google. Is that correct?
That is.
Awesome. And I love this podcast. I've been binge listening to it. The episodes are short and sweet. They're like 15 minutes each, and they really tell the human story of SEO. So if you're looking for more content to consume, that's one I like. I'm going to skip the what's next in IMG this week. Well, I can't. I see Clint's name there. Check out his course from the library. It's a good one using Cora. And let's see what else
update
is
that too. So if anyone's listening and they're members of IMG and they're taking that course, drop your notes in there what you want to update. I had some requests for updates for the new Cora 6 version user interface. I don't know if you've officially released that or not, but some people have it and they're asking for help with it. So
yeah, it's within days, like within days of the official release. If you're a current Cora customer and you go to the install page, you can see the betas there. So if you're desperate for getting the betas, they are publicly available. Just reach out to me if you have trouble finding them. We have an Ask the Expert coming up next week. So if you're in IMG, I share everything. So there's nothing too secret for me to not share in those meetings. So if you show up and ask me my deepest secrets, it's an open book. And that'll bring us back to Fight Club. One new thing that I'll just briefly mention here. If you've seen me talk about ranking probabilities on the show, if you're a regular here, you probably remember this data. I've actually turned that into a software tool for SEOs. And it is just, to me, it's proving to be an amazing diagnostics tool for technical SEO. And I have a bunch of videos on how I use it and the information I find. So you can go to this website, SEOvolatility.com, if you want to learn about the tool. I have sample reports on the documentation page. So if you want to look at some sample reports and watch the videos, go ahead, check it out if you're interested. I'm having a lot of fun with this tool so far. You've been kicking the tires a little bit, Clint. What do you think?
yeah, I'm already got new ideas and for use cases that I'm going to do with it, just beyond what you've already thought of. Some of it I'm still learning. Obviously, you just released it as the beta, but I'm already in love with it. So I just got to use it some more while it's still running on your API credits before you get smart and make other people use theirs.
Well, we'll see how bad it gets. Hopefully, I'll flip the bill for everyone using it. That's the way it's set up right now. So if you get in now, it's all on my API. So it's a cool tool. It's not for everyone. It is, more diagnostic than your typical SEO tool, but it's really simple too. It gives you direct information. So watch the videos, see if it's something that you like. And it just so happens that the data I'm showing in the show comes from this tool. So title variance. So the first thing we need to do in this topic is talk about the difference between title variance and title rewriting. And what everybody is up in arms about right now is Google rewriting the titles. So that's when Google looks at what you have, they say, I don't think that's right, and they rewrite your title for you and show something else in search. Title variance is different. Title variance is when Google is split testing two or more different titles for the same URL. And when that happens, we can measure how they rank and interesting things about what they pick for variant titles and how those choices affect rankings. So what we're not doing is detecting when Google is rewriting a title, which is very common right now. Right now, we're looking at title variance, which is when Google can't pick, when they can't decide on which title to use. So they use two or more and split test them. And that's a lot less common, but the software I just talked about detects it because it's part of SEO volatility. Does that make sense, Clint?
Yeah, it does.
So another thing I want to talk about is where is the title text coming from? And because of Google's rewriting changes, it's coming from primarily these areas. And I've found cases where it's coming from anchor text. I found cases where it was coming from alt attributes and images. There have been cases of it coming from URLs. For example, here's this title with this, and you see how it's hyphen delimited. So that's in URLs as well, but I think in this case, it was coming from this alt text, which Google seems to have a preference for when the title tag and the headings don't work out. Their next go-to seems to be the alt. So I think if they changed this image alt, that it would change up here too. But they're drawing from a lot of different places. And so you have to keep in mind that if your title tag looks like a bullshit tag to Google, they're going to shop these other areas. What have you been seeing, Clint?
Yeah, I don't know necessarily BS tag, but they're, the separators, the slashes and the dots and all that, they're using that as cues to indicate that maybe this is not clear on what that page is about. And then I noticed some niches where they're using entirely just the H1s. And I've seen in the wild, Amazon's been beat up left and right from this. A lot of their title tags were switched to URLs, which makes no sense to me from a user perspective.
Yeah, and if you think about it, what SEOs have been doing the past 5 or 10 years is doing conversion rate optimization in the title tag and meta description to try to win the click.
Right.
And so these text zones are highly optimized to get people to click on them, but they don't necessarily represent what the page is about. And so I think what Google is doing is they're using NLP to summarize the page or to look at sentences on the page that best summarize the content. And so they're probably scoring the headings, they're scoring the title, they're scoring the alt attributes, and they're scoring sentences. And then they're picking from the ones that score the best. And I think if those scores for the best ones are too close together, then you get into these cases where Google is split testing between the best scoring ones. And that's where I think that title rewriting and title variance have a touch point, is when Google is conflicted about which one to use. And so in this first example, the keyword is Las Vegas SEO. And we see over here the two titles. And what's so surprising about this to me is the only thing that's different in these titles is the number of jobs they had at the time the title was captured. And so we learned several things from this. One, that having a dynamic number in your title causes volatility in your rankings because they don't rank the same. One has an average rank of 38, the other one has an average rank of almost 55. So when Google said that, modifying the title doesn't affect rankings, well, very clearly we can measure that it does, but we only can see the difference when Google is split testing. So if Google picks one of these and sticks to it, we won't be able to measure that there's a difference in ranking. But because they split test, we can see very clearly that different titles rank differently. And so I suspect that one of these is getting like a freshness, bonus. One of these is more current. And it's weird that Google has a memory. They know the old one and they're testing against the old one with the new one. And the only difference is the number of jobs. And so here we can see that the title tag didn't have that text. They actually pulled it from a dynamic H1. So this is a case where they weren't doing a dynamic title, but it's a dynamic heading. And now we need to know that headings being dynamic like that could be dangerous too for volatility.
Can you explain quickly how that your tool is getting this? Because the obvious argument would be, oh, well, you checked it those first 6 times and they had 221 listings, and then you checked it again and then it had 224.
So
that's not actually the case because of how quick the tool works.
Yeah, the software is checking your rankings as quickly as possible within about a minute. So all these rank checks happen in quick succession, and we try to get them all under a minute so that we have a lot of samples, and all this variation, this testing, the variance in rankings and the appearance of these different titles happen within a minute. And so nothing's actually changed on the page. This is all just what Google is choosing to do in their search results. And we're measuring that variance. And we found with this title, we got these 4 rankings because we checked 10 times. And we got, for this title, we got these 6 rankings, and we can see they have a different average rank. And all of this occurred within a minute. And so when we say your rankings are volatile, we mean that, when you use a rank tracker and you find out that your rank is, 38, not necessarily that instantaneous rank measurement might have been a lucky roll of the dice. And when we look at the probability of your rankings, we find out that, yeah, you don't normally rank there. You most commonly rank at number 56, which is 30% of the time. So your rankings aren't these, static scalars that rank trackers have led you to believe. They're actually odds. And so we use these probability strings to place the bet. So if we had to describe to someone in Las Vegas on what they would see if they searched this keyword for this URL, we'd say that URL will appear in 100% of searches. 30% of the time, it'll be number 56 with a worst case of 56. So we know that Google's doing upward position testing. But most of the time, you'll be at that number 56 spot. And we can detect, since we're getting the search results 10 times, we can look at what the title text is and does it change. And it goes back and forth between the new one and the old one. And so that's how we're getting this data and we're seeing this variance. But it's very interesting that it picked a dynamic H1 and that it's causing variance for being the title text and the search result. And it's quite a bit of variance, 38 and 55. That's a big jump. And it's all based on how many jobs they had, which one was the fresh one, which one wasn't.
Ted, oh, sorry, I had a quick question for you. Could this be an example of data being rolled out among different data centers? So the old crawl was maybe the 221, and the new crawl, they have 224, which is now rolling out across the things, and they haven't gotten to the 228 today. Is that
it's possible, but generally unlikely, because those data center rollouts tend to happen in hours. So if it was changed within the past couple hours, then sure. But if it hasn't been changed, then we're seeing Google's memory. And I'll show you some other ones later here that highlight that, yeah, there's no way that changed recently. So let's look at another one. So this one came up in an NFG video, this keyword puppy feeding schedule. And so I wanted to check it out for variance. And there's two cases of Google split testing the titles. And so in this first one, the only difference was the .com on the brand. So I thought that was remarkable. And so I think that Google probably scored these and they scored close to identical. And that's probably why Google couldn't pick one. And then it went into split testing. And we can see that they rank almost exactly the same, but it's for some reason favoring one more than the other. So this is what I think is happening when the titles score too close to the same that Google doesn't know how to pick. And so you might want to be consistent with this presentation just so that Google isn't doing the split testing. On the second one, the thing that's different is it added the brand. And what's so interesting about it adding the brand is that adding the brand kicked out a keyword match. So puppy feeding schedule, we lost feeding, and the rank is lower. And so I would see something like this and go, oh, we want to try to figure out what we can do to get those keywords in before Google would add in the brand. So you may have to worry about character counts now. If Google's going to dynamically add the brand, you don't want it to dynamically remove the keyword that helps it rank better. This one came from New York SEO. And the only thing different in this one is the capital T. So they scored the same, but this is probably a glitch in Google's thing where it should be case insensitive and it's not. And I went and looked in there, and sure enough, they're not being consistent with the case of the T and the. They're also mixing it up with ink and marketing. And so I think, a best practice that'll emerge out of this is you need to go through and be very consistent with your branding. Do it the same way everywhere so that you can eliminate more volatility and help Google, understand that, no, this is the proper brand for the page. Use this proper branding.
I've seen that with a lot of the H1 uses too, where the web designer made the H1 tags all capitalized. But when they're entering it into the page, they're not bothered taking the time to capitalize it. So they're using the lowercase letters all the way through and just saying, well, it shows up as capitalized. That's what I want. But Google is using the lowercase versions and not automatically fixing the title caps.
And the reason that's a big problem, those web designers counted on the CSS to capitalize the first letter.
Yeah.
And so if your web design allows for that handicap, that's going to potentially cause volatility now. And so you need to go and be consistent with all of that. So here's another dynamic one. So the title was just gift baskets and the Macy's brand, and Google opted for the H1, which is dynamic with a product count for the category. And at different times, they captured different amounts of in-stock products. And so this is another case where, clearly there's some variance in how they're ranking. They happen to average out nicely, but it looks like they're being treated differently. And you may need to find a different way to convey this information without it being in the zone that Google's picking from. So I think your H1s need to be topically on point, not dynamically on point, because they're probably going to lead to trouble if you keep going down this path.
What would be the purpose? And this is totally off base, so you can tell me to ask me later if you want. But why would a big ecom site vary like that? So 178 to 184 to 185. Why would it change that often? Is it a play to keep the bots coming back because the page is always changing?
No, it's typically to try to convince shoppers there that there's a good big selection here. Because the bots don't care if there's one product or 200. It doesn't matter. And it turns out that the shoppers don't care either. So if you have a socks and shoes category and you can join them together because it makes a big number like 184, that's not necessarily a good thing, especially if the shopper has to go through 12 pages of shoes to find the 4 pairs of socks you offer.
Right.
You typically want to break those conjoined categories and have a category with 4 pairs of socks that people don't have to hunt for. And so the shopper doesn't care if there's a big number there. It's typically the product buyers and the store owners feel insecure about those numbers, and then they force them to be in there so they feel good.
I was thinking maybe it was like a crawl frequency type of thing, so that every time the bot comes back, they see a different set. You know, it's 178 to 185 is not that much of a range change, but it's still something different. So this time it's 185. Next time you go back, it's 183. Next time the bot go back, it's 182.
Well,
so they're trying to trick the bot, I would say, into saying, hey, this page is always updated a lot, keep coming back a lot.
Well, the new normal is that this dynamic heading is causing your rankings to go from 72 72 72 to 60 82 83 75 61. So by having that dynamic heading, you have this very volatile story.
Yeah.
And so probably eliminating that number from the H1 would probably solidify your rankings into something more stable.
All righty.
If we look at video games here, we see several. So here's the CNN one. So again, they added the brand instead of a couple words. So that's really interesting. They scored very closely. They all had the same ranking. So it didn't matter too much, but it forced Google into split testing. Here's another one where they were inconsistent with the branding. And this one did have a little bit of difference, a little bit of variance in the ranking. And so, it's a case where you just want to go through and figure out what's the most proper form of your branding and just be strict and consistent with that.
There's a good user intent lesson in there too, if you look at all those sites.
Yep. And then here we have an actual Google, let's rewrite this sucker. They're put in the branding at the end and then the branding at the beginning. And clearly those are different rankings. So 19 to 23 is pretty noticeable difference. And so you'd want to go in and figure out is there some way that you can be more consistent so Google would pick one? And so that's an important part of this, is to definitely figure out, is there, can I be consistent in the title and the heading and get Google to choose the right one? So one of the things that I've noticed since Google started doing this first with meta descriptions. And what the SEO community did was they said, oh, Google's picking it, so I don't need to tune for it anymore. I just won't even populate a meta description anymore. And that's all based on an assumption that what Google is doing is split testing different versions and figuring out which one ranks best for the content and then picks that one. So I looked at, about 10 or so, and the bad news is Google generally doesn't pick the one that helps you rank best. In fact, the opposite tends to be true. In this case, there were two different titles, Gift Basket's brand, and then from their H1, it had the pagination string. And which one did Google ultimately decide on after the testing? The pagination string. And the pagination string ranked worse. So it was a number 6, and now they're a number 7. So Google did not pick the one that helped the content rank the best. So if you're counting on Google to make the right pick, that's not what this is for. This is going to pick the right thing for Google's needs, not the right thing for your page's needs. And that's why I've been saying for, a year now, if you're not tuning your meta description, you're crazy. Google's not going to do right by you. And it took about 10 of these before I found one where Google picked a higher ranking one. I'll show you one more though. This one was for New York SEO. This website had the brand at the end here. One of these was a title, one was a H1, and ultimately Google picked the one that ranked worse. So what's interesting about it is the one that ranked best had the timeshare. So in the worst ranking position, they got rid of their time sharing, which is very good. But if we're solely basing it on where it ranks, it didn't pick the one that ranked the best. It picked the one that ranked the worst. And to me, that makes me wonder the fact that it's so common that the better of the two it's picking, it's throwing out. It's kind of like diving in the Olympics where you get the 10 scores, but to make sure it's unbiased and fair, they throw out the top scores. I think Google's doing something like that here, where it's picking 2 or 3 of the best scoring and then throwing out the top score among those. So what are your thoughts, Lee? You think they're doing Olympic diving scores?
I don't know. The data points are, they're kind of close together. If you had, 6 and 7, and some of those, it's consistent, and that worries me. It would worry me a lot more if, the one title I'm ranking number 6, the other title I'm ranking number 12. Then it's a big drop on those sort of things. So I don't know what it is they're doing, but you know what? The idea that just trust Google, they'll take care of you, is not something that I would ever be comfortable with. So, this data has given me enough to go
That's
in and
nonsense. They have your best interest at heart.
Okay, if you say so, Clint, I'm good.
Hey, I read it on Search Engine Land. I read it on Search Engine Land. They never lie.
Oh, they never do. Yeah. So I'm glad you got that. But that's one of the reasons why, now that they're messing with that, just like they did with the meta description. Now I think we have to go through and figure out, okay, what's a way that we can force them to use what we want. And sometimes, the best title or the best description, the meta description, might not have your keyword in it because you might have it, tuned for something else that the audience will click on. So, Google always assumes that they know better if, their algorithm scores what you've got worse than something else that they could use. And that assumption is not necessarily safe for CRO either. So we're going to start some testing on this to see if we can figure out how to compel them to use the title that we want them to use.
Yeah, and it's really interesting seeing the cases where there are, you know, 2 or 3 titles that Google's conflicted on and split testing, because the differences between those titles are kind of telling as to, you know, what Google is detecting and how the system works. And so I can already tell that, you know, having those dynamic pagination strings and headings, that's already a worse practice. Like you need to go modify your online store to not do those in heading tags.
Well, the other thing I noticed with some of the examples is, you know, sometimes they want to use the brand at the end. And, you know, if you've got a long title, they're going to cut off whatever it is that they need to cut off to fit that brand on the end.
Yeah,
And so,
you're exactly right. Your important keywords need to be early on. That's a new best practice too, because that cutoff, it affects rankings.
right.
Well, we've been teaching that for quite a while because that's cutting off the title and adding the brand is not new. Like
Well,
we've seen that for quite some time, and we've also seen the H1 implication or change for quite some time too. But it was mostly, from what I've noticed, it was mostly a lot of the Google properties. So like YouTube, it would do it religiously. And like drop like SEO this week, for example. I use SEO this week, and then I have a divider and then the episode title, or I flip flop it, and Google would drop SEO this week out of the titles and just put whatever the topic was and then youtube.com. So I've seen that consistently before they released this. And I think to Lee's point of how do we get to test it to find the zones that they pick, I think you've already kind of identified where they're finding it. And I haven't seen anyone with an example of, hey, they pulled it right out of this, like this line of text yet in the paragraph, which could be potentially could be next for the past based off that passage indexing tech that's in play right now. So, but I haven't seen any instances of that. So I shouldn't find it too hard to be able to look at that and find out where they're doing it in your niche. Like one niche that I'm working in pretty regularly, it's the H1s. They're going after the H1s. They've essentially changed 80% of the title tags for all the various searches to the H1s at the sites that are doing. So I know that in that market, that's where they're doing it. Amazon, I don't know what the hell they're doing at Amazon, but
yep.
I'm pretty sure that Amazon would have a business attack case. Hey, we're a direct competitor and you're turning all our title tags to URLs, making us look bad. you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it'll be pretty interesting as we look at these more, and actually with your tool, it helps out more. Well, it makes it easier to look at niches a lot faster. And then put that data together. And then to your point with the Olympic swimming thing, I mean, you said before the call that you already had 400 instances, and I'm not a big math guy, but if you're taking out the top pages and then you're picking the average of the worst rankings, I bet you we could learn how to do that and figure that out pretty quick.
Well, the interesting thing, if Google is looking at these zones of your page, scoring them and throwing out the top 2, then the trick is to make the top 3 or 4 all be the same, and then you can force the issue. But
all those people who weren't using the same H1 and title tags are probably kicking themselves right now.
Yeah. And if you had dynamic titles and dynamic text within headings, and you're using the heading tags to be stylized, well, now they're load bearing for SEO. And, you know, that's probably going to bite you in the ass, especially if you're doing it site-wide, like in all your categories. That's going to be a lot of volatility in your rankings.
Yeah, all those people that John Mueller convinced that H1 tags don't matter for SEO are kicking themselves right now, or at least wondering what the hell's going on.
Well, the silly part is to make claims like that about something that we can actually measure. Like all of us could measure that.
Yeah, but no one listens to us that day.
Yeah. So let's see. Somebody is saying, Ted, do you have an affiliate program for your software? Yes, just reach out to me offline. The contact form at SEO Tool Lab is fine, or if we're friends on Skype, just ping me on Skype. It's just my name in Skype, so if you know my name, you can track me down. Let's see. Thane says, I mean, the Amazon URLs being a bug rather than the title changing itself being a bug. Maybe Google is experimenting and things went horribly wrong. Yeah, you know, who knows? I would expect there to be gremlins in a system this new. That would be par for the course. So, you know, we'll have to see how things settle down over time.
I think whatever they used as the data set to teach this thing before they launched it was the wrong choice. And my guess is they were probably using YouTube. That's because that's where I first saw the changes. And when they applied it full on to the real world, it just went all nuts. So I don't know. I don't think they'll turn it off, but I don't think the titles are going to be nicer anytime soon.
Yeah. And I think, you know, with Google dynamically creating titles, you know, there's some potential for some very weird edge cases. So Google could accidentally create, you know, accusations or false statements by joining things together that shouldn't be joined. Now, those things would be quite rare, but just the fact that it's even possible. And you could probably game this system to make Google, you know, post false statements in the title. So you could probably influence this to make Google say ridiculous things in search that don't actually exist on your page. So there's probably going to be a number of comical exploits of this system, I would imagine, in time.
You think they really needed to do this, or is this like we can do it, so let's do it? Why not? You know?
Well,
is there really
if I put on my nefarious capitalist villain hat, and you know, I'm a nefarious capitalist villain too, but if we think like a business, and particularly Google's business, we have all these CRO people that are doing excellent work on winning the click. Well, what does that excellent work do to clicking on ads? Yeah. Well, if CROs are good at what they do, and most of them are pretty damn good, then the ads suffer. They're taking clicks away from the ads. So if Google eliminates the ability to CRO the title and description text in the search results, then all of that gets a lot more formulaic and boring, and the ads are allowed to be sparkly and exciting.
Right.
So I think that's the motivation, is that search results need to be on topic and factually relevant, and all the CRO needs to go into the ad system.
You know, I was thinking about what you said earlier about the potential exploits. And I was sitting there thinking, all right, if I owned the domain asshat.com, to use your phrase there, Ted, and, you know, my branding was asshat, and I wrote an article that said, you know, the title of it was, you know, Lee Witcher is an amazing, wonderful, loving person, but it truncates it to Lee Witcher is an asshat.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just, yeah.
Well, he said made up. You didn't say factual.
Well, you know, that would be an argument for the AI did its job. But,
yeah. If you had a Clue, the board game fan site, mm-hmm. and you called it Wins the Case. Mm-hmm. And then on that fan site, you also had blog posts about the address of local law firms. you could get those law firms in trouble because Google would put together those H1s with the law firm name and the brand and then violate the Bar Association ethical guidelines. Now, is that a crime? No, but it could cause grief for people, and Google would generate it in search, and it wouldn't exactly exist on the page. So there's these weird edge cases. Are they common? No, but there is room for this system to have some really bizarre things happen, some really probably hilarious black hat shenanigans. There's
you mean like cloaking your H1s? Like you taught us how to do it with HTML, where we can set it to display none and have like 30 H1s on the site.
Yeah,
set our own variance testing right there.
Yeah, right. All of that needs to be retested because this system is digging for things, and we don't know if they're going to abide by the no snippet. Yeah. We don't know if they're going to abide by, if it's hidden or not, or if it's dynamic from JavaScript or not. We don't know how this system works. There's a whole world of testing it that hasn't even happened yet.
I'm going to test that one out.
That's a good one. It's one of the ones that I was thinking of a variation on that. The other one is maybe best practice is to make your entire content an H1 and just let them pick the title. Just saying, it's a stupid system, but you know what?
Instead of opening body tag, opening H1, closing body tag.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking. If they want to do this, they want to play this game, let's play this game. Come on.
Yeah. So I guess with all these changes, the two important things you should probably walk away with is dynamic text and headings and titles. Tread with care, and you need to be super consistent with your branding, talking about your case and whether it's .com or .inc or you just got to get strict about it. Because if not, it's going to cause you headaches down the road.
And writing good H1s and H2s and H3s for sure now are even more important, especially when you're trying to rank for multiple words in a keyword cluster on a page.
So you're back on the good content train. Glad to see it, Clint.
Oh, I never left a good content train. You can still rank a page with just schema. Just saying, a blank page with schema, but I've never left a good contract.
Well, with that, that's all I got. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.